U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.
If you boil down to what my job is, I am a one-stop shop for financial management and project management for Jay and Laura. So you could say that I hold Jay's purse. All right, federal budget process. I suspect most of you didn't think you would woke up this morning thinking that you were going to get a lesson from your high school civics class in a presentation about the federal budget process. But I think it's important to note and hold in the context our federal budget process in our style of government. So the executive branch is responsible for requesting how much money they want to spend and what they're going to spend it on to Congress. Congress, though, has the final say. They're the ones who decide what actually is going to get spent and what it's going to get spent on. Then it goes back to the executive branch to actually execute what Congress has enacted. The actual budget formulation process itself, in its simplest denominator, is really a series of steps of consolidation and prioritization at progressively higher levels. And you'll see that as a common theme as we go through each of the steps that the budget formulation goes through, from the executive branch all the way up through the legislative branch. So the budget starts, at least for the environmental management program, it starts at the sites. And that makes sense. That's appropriate. The sites are in the best position to know what work needs to get done, the resources to do that work, and they are where the contracts are to execute that work. So each site then develops their budget based on their priorities, and then each site submits it to headquarters, Environmental Management Office, who then consolidates all of the site's budgets and prioritizes the site's budgets in accordance with headquarters priorities. Once environmental management program is done, it's then submitted to the Secretary of Energy's office. The Chief Financial Officer is the one who does the consolidation for the Secretary of Energy, along with all of the other programs. So then you have the Chief Financial Officer consolidating and prioritizing all of the program budgets within the Department of Energy based on the Secretary of Energy's priorities. The Secretary then submits the budget along with all of the other departments' budgets to OMB, Office of Management and Budget. That's the office that does the consolidation and prioritization of all of the budgets for the President. And once OMB is done, it goes to the President, who then submits it to Congress. Now we're at Congress. So now it's in the legislative branch's hands. And we all know that Congress consists of a House and a Senate. Both House and Senate have subcommittees that are the starting point from when the President's budget comes in. That's where it goes for Department of Energy. We're in the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee. These subcommittees take the President's budget and literally the term is mark it up. It used to be before computers, there were hard copies, paper copies given from the President's subcommittees, and they literally marked up on the page the changes that they wanted to make. So you've got the House Subcommittee and Senate Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development that then marks up and decides how much money the Department of Energy is going to get, and specifically how much EM is going to get. It then goes to the Appropriation Committee, and we all know how powerful that is. That's a very powerful committee. They control the purse for the country. The Appropriation Committee takes all the subcommittees' markups, creates a final appropriation bill that then goes to the floor, both the House and the Senate. Once it's passed, then that becomes the appropriation bill for the House and Senate. But because there's two different branches, it's not very common that both of those agree or in lockstep on what the budgets are going to be. So there's a conference that's established made up of members of both the House and Senate Appropriation Committee that then resolves any differences and develops a budget that then goes back to the final floor for a final forward vote on both the House and the Senate. And once that happens, it goes to the President and signed into law. And now we're back into the execution phase. The President then executes what Congress has enacted. Notice it takes 2 years to do that process. So we're right now in the development stage of FY21's budget, which will be enacted in 2 years from now. So we're now planning for 2 years what we're going to be doing. And right now, this stage is in the stage for the FY20 President's budget. All right. Now, Oak Ridge's budget development is really nothing more than an extension of our planning process. And we pride ourselves in having a very robust planning process. And that planning process consists of first identifying, I went way too far. First identifying what work is going to get done. This isn't just work for the next 2 years. This is for the work to complete the cleanup of the reservation. So we're constantly looking all the way to what scope needs to be done to complete the EM mission in Oak Ridge. Then once you define the scope, then we assign what's the resources it's going to take, the labor and material resources it's going to take to get that work done. That's your cost estimate. Then we develop the duration, how long it's going to take to do that work, and then sequencing that work to make sure that that work is done in a logical sequence. We can't do step 2 before we do step 1. And then, of course, we do an analysis of what can change, what can go wrong, and make sure that we've got that factored into the best that we can. Now, to give you an idea of our planning, it's fairly robust. We've broken our scope down into what we call sub-projects, roughly 150 of them. So to give you an example of what a sub-project level is, it's demolition of a complex of buildings. It can be remediation of soil in a specific area at a site. It can be operating a waste treatment facility, or it can be doing surveillance and maintenance on our excess facilities. So that's what our sub-projects are. We've got 150 of those. But below that sub-project level, we've got over 20,000 activities that we've scheduled, that we've broken our scope down into that level, and that we do scheduling against our predecessor-successor relationships in a logical sequence of work that's got to be done. So it's not a trivial exercise. We've got some fairly breadth and depth to our planning. And then, of course, all of this planning's got to get rolled up into the congressional accounts, the accounts that Congress actually appropriates money for Oak Ridge environmental cleanup. And there's 13 of those. All right, so now you've come to a presentation on the federal budget, and you haven't seen one number yet. So that's where we're going to go now. FY19 budget was a pretty healthy $650 million. That's a good budget for Oak Ridge. Our budget consists of 3 appropriations, and those appropriations are the UED&D fund. That was a special trust fund that was created by Congress to clean up the 3 gaseous diffusion plants, ETTP, Paducah, Portsmouth. The reason it was created as a trust fund because the utility companies that benefited from operations of the gaseous diffusion plants paid into this fund. So Congress has that that special fund that the utilities companies have contributed into, and then they appropriate money out of that. This is where we clean up ETTP. Non-defense, we get that money is to honor our commitments in the MOA for the historical significance of K-25. And then our biggest pot is the defense appropriation, and we've broken that out for you here to show you what all makes up that $424 million. The biggest pieces are this waste operations and S&M. We operate a waste treatment facility at ORNL, and we also operate landfills and our circular disposal facility at Y-12, and we also have to do surveillance and maintenance on the excess facilities that EM owns. And I think many of you are aware most of those facilities are pushing 70 years old, well past their design life. U-233, that's the pot of money that we use to disposition the remaining U-233 material that's stored at ORNL. This is the processing and shipping of our contact handled, remote handled, and transuranic sludges at ORNL. And we've got a big chunk of money in 19 to start our construction on the mercury treatment facility, which Jay will go into. We actually got that construction contract awarded, and Brian should have them out in the field when? Next week. There we go. All right, and then excess facilities. In 19, well, Congress appropriated money to start cleanup in the central campus of ORNL. If you recall from my presentation last year, Congress gave us money in 18 to go do the biology complex at Y-12. They followed in 19 with money to go after the central campus at ORNL. All right. To Christoph's comment, we've enjoyed a steady increase in our funding and has been fairly constant the last 2 years in the $650 million range. You can see for the UED&D fund, it's been fairly constant. This is adequate for us to maintain that trained and skilled workforce we have at ETTP to complete that cleanup. And UCOR is doing an excellent job performing and knocking the buildings down and cleaning the dirt at ETTP. This is the funding we've been getting fairly constant for doing the historical preservation commitments at K-25. And then, of course, this is where we're starting to see the increases the last 2 years. And this is noteworthy because if we can get this defense budget increased and sustained, then when our cleanup at ETTP is complete and we start losing this UED&D fund, because it can only be done for gaseous diffusions. Once ETTP is done, this money is going to go to Paducah Portsmouth. So we need this defense budget increased so that we can transition the workers that are being funded out of the UED&D fund to defense, which is going to fund the cleanup at ORNL and Y-12. All right. 19, there's our $650 million budget broken down between the congressional, or each of the appropriations, and then the congressional control accounts within each appropriation. And Congress actually appropriates money at this level. So they're controlling and telling us how much money they want to spend at ETTP, ORNL, Y-12. So this is a good budget for us. The 20 president's budget, however, shows pretty significant decrease. This has been pretty consistent with what the president's budget has been the last few years. We have a House mark already in that puts us at the $600 million level, which is the highest the House has ever marked for us. And the Senate mark we expect in this month should be coming out, and we expect that it'll be in this range as well. So we're confident, Christoph, that at least for 20, we'll be able to continue to sustain funding in the $600 million range. The biggest difference here was in this account right here, where the president's budget didn't support any funding to do cleanup. And that's pretty consistent with the way it's been in the past, because D&D has been a low priority from a headquarters perspective. So that's all I have.
So a few years ago, back in 2014, I think several folks have probably got copies of it. We had a program plan we came out with. We designed it to be our strategic plan, but interestingly enough, headquarters is the only person that can have a strategic plan, so we had to call it a program plan. But this is actually the 2017 update. We try to update it every couple of years. If you're interested in it and you don't have a copy, it sits right on our homepage as well, so you can click on that and see it. And I'll show you how we've tracked against the goals. But we set 4 cleanup goals. There's 4 programmatic goals as well, but they're not specific for cleanup. It was more for the organization. You're welcome to look at those, but it really doesn't pertain well to this particular budget presentation. But what this does for us is make sure everyone in my organization, all the stakeholders, know what we see as our goals to achieve to advance the cleanup mission here in Oak Ridge. And the way this slide deck is laid out, it kind of hits each one of those goals, so you can see how we're tracking against it. Obviously, out at ETTP, we're quickly approaching 2020, and we're on track to make our vision there, which was to have the majority of cleanup done out there. All the buildings will be on the ground. Most of the soil work will be done. There may still be a few areas that we're still doing some soil work in, and we hope to have groundwater decisions as well, although the groundwater remediation will take a little bit longer than that. So we're pretty happy about how we're progressing on this. For example, K1037, the barrier plant, it's done. So all that waste has already been shipped off. So that building was on the ground a couple of weeks ago, and all the waste shipment has occurred. The K29 pad has been pulled up now. It's gone. We have 1 Poplar Creek facility left. When it is gone, that will be all the gaseous diffusion facilities out at the site will have been dealt with and been disposed of. We're into the centrifuge facilities now and are actually preparing centrifuges to ship out west unless we've already done that. Jim, all right, so some of them have already gone, so there you go. So we're making very good progress out there, and like I said earlier, I would highly encourage you, if you haven't been out by the site, go out there and look. If you haven't seen the site in the past, it's kind of hard to visualize now because it's mostly flat ground. So, especially for some of us that have been there a long time ago. You can kind of see the aerial here that shows, see if I get this right, kind of shows where the GDP was, and of course the History Center, that should be open this fall, if not before then, so that's progressing quite well as well. And so when that opens up, I'm sure we'll have a grand opening there for it. I guess it's technically right here, the fire hall. You can see this has been transferred, this property. Of course, the Cokie facility sits here or will sit here, and that's been transferred as well. Oh, yeah, perfect. So you can see how much has been transferred and how many buildings and how many folks. So that's really kind of our vision out there is, in a perfect world, I will have no more responsibility of the site come 2024. That probably won't be completely true because there's some classified burial grounds, a few things like that, but we're in discussions with Legacy Management, DOE's Office of Legacy Management, LM, and hope to have what little bit is left out there, including the History Center, transfer to them as well by 24. So then EM will be completely focused, I hope, at that point over at ORNL and Y12. U-233 inventory, we direct shipped about half that material a couple of years ago, got that done ahead of schedule and under budget. We've been working on the design and the build out in the 2026 facility, which is the hot cell facility you see here that's across the street from 3019. We actually have a third, or Isotech does, we allowed it, but we're not party to the agreement, but contractor, and they're actually going to work some of the lower activity material in a glove box so that we can get into material disposition of what's remaining even quicker. So that's progressing along very well. And I think we're scheduled for the RA readiness assessment for that. And I think Bill's behind the column, August. Okay, so hopefully by the end of the year, we'll actually be doing some processing there while they're also doing the build out in the hot cell. Shipping at TWPC, so both RH and CH are better than 95% processed. We've shipped, I think, about 3/4 of our CH. We've not shipped any of the RH. We're storing that. Right now, headquarters is looking at how they're going to coordinate all the shipping campaigns throughout the nation for the RH when they start taking RH at WIP. They're not ready to do that yet. We came up with some storage containers so that we could temporarily store it in overpacks over in a facility that UCOR operates for us. We've actually offered those overpacks. We cannot ship in them. They're not DOT overpacks, but we actually offered those shielded overpacks to WIP to use so that they could put the RH back in it and then put it in the underground. They initially were not very receptive of that idea because it takes a safety basis change. It also takes a license change. You've gotten out from behind the column now. So, and you look like a bouncer standing like that, Bill. I just want to say. Notice I'm on the bar thing tonight, Belinda. But they now, when I was in D.C. a couple of weeks ago for a field managers meeting, I talked to Todd Schrader, who is the manager of WIP. Next week will be EM2. And they're back interested in that. So if that occurs, that may make us one of the earliest ones to ship. So we're kind of pushing that at this point. Otherwise, we may be one of the last. We either, on all the scenarios, we're either the very first ones or the last ones to ship RH. It's kind of interesting how that works. But we also have some infrastructure things that we need to do to get ready for full-blown D&D at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Y12. So out at Y12, part of it is building the mercury treatment facility that's near Outfall 200 and collects the waters from there. That we did the early site prep, got that done several months ahead of schedule, several $1 million under cost. Right before the end of the year, last year in 2018, we awarded the contract for the balance of construction. I think you heard from Brian next week. They're actually mobilized and will be out there constructing that facility. Given the funding that we got in 19 and what our House mark looks like and what we think the Senate mark will look like, we may be fully funded for that construction project. So that should help us pull some things to the left, right, Brian? Yeah, so I'm making Brian make a public commitment here and not make a fool out of me, right? So a couple other things we need to do out there. We need to extend the Hall Road over to Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we're actually working with the site office to see the best route to do that so that when we do stuff at ORNL, it'll mean we can stay out of commerce similar to how we are at ETTP. We're also, something that we kind of forgot, which is kind of tickles me when we had the aha moment and realized we were behind schedule on it. We thought about the Hall Road. We thought about Outfall 200. We thought about having to expand the cell. We didn't think about where we would house people. And as it turns out, Y12 and ORNL a lot more congested than ETTP. There's active operations there, and I don't own the site. So that was kind of a eye-opener and a little minor kerfuffle, but we think we have found a place we can house everybody near ORNL and have our own portal to get in with. So we're in its Y12 owned property, but we think we'll be able to do this right there, kind of the corner of Scarborough Road and thank you, Dave, Bethel Valley Road. So I think that will become an area that we will relocate most of our folks to start in earnest out there, and we can use the road that kind of runs parallel to Bethel Valley Road and put our own portal in and bring folks in that way. So we're looking at all those things so that when we get ready to go full bore out there, we have the infrastructure in place. As I think you guys have seen this slide many times, but point here is we've got more excess high-risk facilities in Oak Ridge than any other site. The funding we've gotten in 16, 17, 18, and 19 is allowing us to get out ahead of that much quicker than our original baseline, which is good. And I'm going to jump ahead, which is good because this is what some of it looks like. So this is the Colex equipment that was outside Alpha 5 or Alpha 4 at ORNL, or Y12, can't get it all right. Out of this, we've collected now, between this and the equipment on the other side, we've collected right around 5 tons of liquid mercury, maybe 5.1, 5.2, something like that. Is that right, Brian? Yes, you're making me feel like I'm not exactly right on that, but a lot of mercury. We're currently storing that inside the facility right now. We've tried to figure out a way. When I have non-rad elemental mercury, I'm kind of in a catch-22. You may remember we had the 45-day review a couple of years ago when Jim Owendorf came in, And one of the things we had submitted was figure out a way to let us get rid of the elemental mercury. The RCRA regulations say I have to put it back in commerce. TSCA says I can't. So I'm kind of stuck. And the TSCA thing is only applicable to federal agencies. So that's kind of got us in a catch-22 right now where I can't get rid of the material. As well, DOE is looking to build a mercury storage facility, so we're also keeping in touch with the folks that are contracting for that. One way or the other, I want to get rid of the liquid mercury. Either amalgamate it and send it out west for disposal or up to Canada for disposal or send it somewhere for storage. I don't want to keep storing it. But you can see this is what it looked like when we took over the equipment, some of the conditions here, and what it looks like today. Nobody knew it had that much mercury in it, so that was a hazard. You know, an outfall too high, or the creek, let me get oriented here, but the creek is right down, if you're at this, it's right down in this area. So if you'd had a major spill, you're not too far from the creek, the thing goes off site. So it was good we got that early. And it's also allowing us to get some lessons learned for how we'll work on mercury. Our production factors here were not what we thought they would be. It became a much more expensive project than we initially anticipated. A lot of that was because we didn't quite completely understand what we're doing with mercury and how to work with it, what kind of PPE to use, et cetera. We've gotten a handle on that, and the production factors have gotten a lot better. We are also bringing in some technology. I'm not going to call it demonstration, but maybe applications from different companies to see if they have better techniques. We've looked at a spray-on fixative that Idaho National Engineering Laboratory, in conjunction with their counterpart in the UK, had come up with. We've tried it once. It didn't seem to be very effective. I think when are we bringing them back in? Still working on that, putting you on the spot. But we are going to bring them back in to see if different ambient temperatures and conditions change the application of that. But we're trying to figure out ways for companies to come in, be able to demonstrate, in some cases, what is unique technologies that they don't want to share because, oh, by the way, there's a big procurement looming as well. So anyway, it has allowed us to get in and do some things. Come back here, we talk about one of the, whenever we're doing cleanup here out at ETTP, it's to transition the site over to the community for redevelopment. Well, what does it mean at Y12 and ORNL? What it means at Y12 and ORNL, and we've said it for years and hadn't really seen it occur yet, was it will enable future missions. With biology complex, as soon as we get it on the ground on a Friday, almost literally on a Monday, if their schedule doesn't slip, they'll start construction of the lithium processing facility. So they have a new lithium capability out there. We stay in very close touch with them, and our schedules, our destruction schedule and their construction schedule are actually linked. And so you see the same thing at ORNL, where an area we cleaned up a few years ago when we had ERA funding. This area here is now going to be the location of their translational research facility. So this is their new facility, and I think they started construction on that a couple weeks ago, in fact. Orient you a little bit, the old 3026 facility is right here. So we will be doing D&D while they're doing new construction, so that should get exciting. This is where we're focused right now. This is Graphite Reactor. And so, I've got that right? Yeah, that's Graphite. Research Reactor, then that one's Graphite Reactor, Bill? Right there, somewhere here. Yeah, right there. So we're up in this area here, going into these facilities and doing DEAC work in here right now with funding we got in 19. And then if we get what we think we're going to get in 20, we'll continue work on that. And then our plan is generally to finish up here with the reactors, clean up Graphite Reactor, turn that back over to science so they can do their historic preservation mission that they have as part of the park. This will actually open this area up for parking or access so you can more easily access it. And then we will move down the hill into Isotope Row here. We have 3038. And then also, I think that's this is 3517. I've got that right? All right, perfect. So have a good deputy. All right, we've talked about that. We've talked about needing landfill capacity. We will need some type of additional landfill capacity. We put the proposed plan out for the new cell. We're still working with the regulators right now, trying to sort out exactly what that cell will look like and sort through some of the hydrology issues and geology issues out at the, I'll call it the preferred site, but at least the selected site that we're focused on. I'm probably getting the regulatory words wrong, and we're on track right now to submit the ROD to the regulators in the August timeframe. I've talked about our vision, finish up ETTP and reindustrialize that, and then enable other site missions so that they can stay in the forefront of what they're doing. And of course, we certainly, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but we certainly do appreciate all the work you guys do. Realize this is a volunteer position, takes time away from your family, so I truly do appreciate the recommendations we get and the time you guys put into this. We certainly look to partner with as many folks as we can. We think that's been how we've been successful, is partnering with our stakeholders, partnering with our contractors, our sister programs, and with labor. And we have very good relationships, which I think are contributing to our success. And so I'll take questions, or I'll redirect those to staff. How about that? So, any questions?
Rudy? Welcome back, by the way.
Yes, sir. I have a question about the budget.
Okay.
If I could, real quick. When it goes over to the Appropriation Committees, to the House and the Senate, and they're looking at it, how do they really know what we need? Is there someone there? Is there an advocate for the different sites to say this is what they really need? Otherwise, you may have people there that have no clue. Well, I mean, they may not have a clue to begin with, but I mean, as far as the actual cleanup monies are needed, how do they know if they're going to mark it up? They have to have some sense of what it really is involved and what monies are needed.
So, Alan, do you want to give the official answer? Okay.
The subcommittees.
You want to use the mic in front of you? Right here, Mike. Right here. The old school. It's on.
Yeah. So the subcommittees, the staff people who work on the subcommittees are very familiar with all the sites. I went to one of the hearings when the president rolled out, I think it was the FY16 budget.
Okay.
I got to go over to the Hill and watch the hearings that the staffers, they call them, that's the working level, and the subcommittees were asking. And in some cases, they knew more than the people who were briefing the EM budget. That's how familiar and in-depth they are. I was surprised at the breadth and depth of knowledge that they have.
So in other words, they have a good handle on what's going on.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and if they don't, or they feel like they didn't get the answers they wanted, for instance, that occurred this year. And so there was actually a follow-on with a permanent staffer from both the Senate side and the House side that met, actually had phone calls with several of the site managers. And in fact, we were one of the sites that they had some very specific questions for. So.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Harriet?
Sure. You commented that there was some problem with your mercury that you've collected not going into the commercial stream.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't give a reason for that.
The reason is regulatory reason, sorry. So if I have mercury that is contaminated with radioactivity, I can amalgamate it and get rid of it as waste or treat it in some fashion. It's typically amalgamation. With mercury that is elemental mercury, RCRA regulations say you must recycle it to put it back into commerce because we're not mining any additional mercury. The TSCA regulations were amended back in the Obama administration to say if you're a federal agency, you may not put it back into commerce. So I can't declare it as waste because it's elemental mercury, and I can't put it in commerce even though I'm told to put it in commerce in one regulation, so it's a regulatory issue. So we had submitted I talked about that and then probably didn't finish the thought, but we had submitted a recommendation to headquarters for our general counsel to work with EPA to figure out, to get us some type of a exception, whatever you want to call it. Nobody seems to be able to solve that problem. So right now I'm storing it.
So whoever's mining mercury doesn't want competition.
I don't think there's any more mining of mercury going on, at least in this country, and I don't think there's any importation, which is why RCRA a number of years ago was amended to say you must put it back into commerce. You must recycle it. And as you probably know, no more of your switches in, used to you had a thermostat. In fact, I just got rid of the last mercury thermostat I had in my house. But everything is going to solid state now. So you have very little use for mercury is one of the problems as well. Certainly not 5 tons. We would like to get an exception and get rid of the material. I don't want to store it. It's just a hazard waiting to spill, right? So.
Thanks.
Ed?
Yeah, thanks. Got a couple questions. Following her question a little bit. So how much mercury have you accumulated and stored?
Out of this project, it's right around 5 tons. How many gallons is that? It's not, yeah, it's not as many as you think because it's so heavy. Okay.
And I imagine that it takes a special type of care, right?
You put in an aliquot, and then it goes into which is a special container, and it goes into the facility right now. Y12 has a whole lot more they have in storage than we do.
Oh, okay.
So I tried to convince them to take ours, and they wouldn't do it.
Well, on the budget, so we as DOE, as part of the agreement with the agencies, they have an FFA milestone, right, with many timelines for many activities. So in fashion in a budget, is this FFA milestone actually put into some sort of an action to choose and select the right activities?
Yeah, when we submit our budgets, part of the submission that we give headquarters identifies what budgets we need to be in compliance and to meet our FFA milestones. So it's factored in and taken into account in our budgets.
Then the transuranic waste, the disposition is unique in the sense that it is determined to be a transuranic waste due to legacy, right? Mm-hmm. Is the fate and the handling of it so differently than if it is just contamination, has contamination or chemical contamination? In terms of, if you have to handle under the EM program waste, you basically do characterization of it and find out what kind of a level.
Yeah, so we do characterization. So they'll take in the legacy containers, they take it in TWPC. Much of it actually, they say, falls out as low-level waste. And so that material will be shipped and disposed of as low-level waste. What remains is true waste gets packaged, and all that will be shipped to WIP. That's the only place that can take it for disposal. Does that answer your?
Yes,
okay.
yes, it does.
Okay.
Now, in terms of one of these slides showing the anticipated cleanup for Y12 and ORNL, is the anticipated mean for the duration of the actual program, or is it anticipated for the next 2 or 3 years only?
Which slide are you on, Ed? I'm sorry.
It depict only. What I want to know is basically for how many years is that anticipation? Okay, so our baseline goes out to 2040 something. So it includes all of that. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one is, I'm sorry about the time it takes. How does DOE share these privately owned technologies? How does DOE get its hands to the shared technology that company A or X may have that they want to use? By contracting?
Yeah, typically that's done through contracting. So what's happening right now, so if we were 5 years ago, the way that would normally be handled is UCOR, whoever the major prime was, would subcontract with a company to bring that, whatever the technology is. Since we're in a potential procurement here in the next few months, a lot of companies right now, or of course if it's proprietary technology, they don't want to share it with a competitor. And so they're trying to figure out the best way to demonstrate the technology may work to us while still maintaining their proprietary technology so it doesn't get out there. So we've been bringing, most of the companies we brought in so far have come in through UCOR, but one of the things we're looking at is perhaps turning the DARA Soils facility into a test bed where folks could come in and test their technology on our soils, our building rubble that we may generate to see how effective it is. The INEL thing was done in conjunction with UCOR coming in, and in the laboratory it looked very hopeful. It was not very successful, at least in the first go-round, and we want to try it again under different atmospheric conditions. You know, it may do different in the wintertime than it does in the summertime, high humidity versus low humidity. So,
if you allow one more, on the recommendations from this board, they're going to actually to headquarters, right? At the end of its route.
yes.
Yes.
Now, do we as a board really get back a feedback from headquarters on what they're going to do about those recommendations? Or is it just that they accepted it and say thank you very much?
I've actually never seen feedback, but I don't know. What is the, yeah. So,
Once it goes up, it comes embargoed.
okay.
The submarine has submerged, and there's no signals.
That's good to know. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
We appreciate it.
But we appreciate your recommendations, of course. So, don't worry. We had a training class yesterday. It was a guy had come down from headquarters to do a Lean Six Sigma, and I had forgotten that this had occurred. But he was talking about an event he had done at headquarters, and a document that Oak Ridge had actually sent up and had been signed by Mark Whitney as the manager of Oak Ridge had gone up, and it had 54 concurrences required by headquarters. And when he looked further, he said, I stopped at 100 sub-concurrences. He said what really brought it to light was it took so long to get to EM1 that Mark Whitney was EM1 by the time the document got to him. So that tells you what happens to our documents. So, yeah, and true story. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ed. Sean?
So not a question, but just a comment. I'm excited and encouraged to hear that we're a bit ahead of schedule for the site preparation for the MTF. I know there was some concern about that project maybe falling behind slightly, so that's good news to hear.
Good.
So great. That's it. Sorry.
A question going back to the planning for the budget. Ann White, when she came in, she made several different efforts to change some of the contracting, going to end state contracting. Is that going to stay in place and move forward?
Really, Dennis? So I'm looking at my procurement director, who's hoping I don't answer wrong here, but or give any procurement sensitive stuff away. I think there will still be a focus on in-state contracting.
Okay.
I was at the cleanup caucus last week, and certainly S3, which was Ann's boss, S4, Paul DeBar, certainly said that he's going to stay focused on in-state contracting. S2 had said the same thing. Mr. Bruyette had said the same thing at an earlier meeting in the day. Now, what that exactly means, right? And I'll just tell you that even when Ann was there, when you said in-state contracting, I'm not sure everybody was in alignment with what exactly that meant. I would argue, from what my understanding of it, that we've been doing it here in Oak Ridge since UCOR came in, because all our PBIs that we pay for, that we finance, they're all focused on getting to an in-state, which is why I think you see some of the production that you see out of UCOR. And that's really what it's about, is making sure that you get, she would use done. But for example, one of the lessons learned we had from the previous contractor was we had paid for stuff for a project to be over, but then there would still be waste there because we had not constructed the PBI to deal with the waste. On all the UCOR PBIs, it requires the waste for them to for the project to be over and them to get the big payout for the PBI, for it to either have a certificate of destruction or disposal or some combination thereof. So it truly is focused on getting done. Right now, we've got a PBI we're working on for finishing up at ETTP, which will be on getting done at the site. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Performance-based incentive. So it's basically a milestone.
Sure.
Think of it that way. It's a milestone payment that says if you get to this and you have evidence that you've achieved the end goal, we will pay you. And it's usually a pretty significant amount for most of the major projects out there. And in fact, in many cases, like for the K-25 building, for the K-27 building, we actually had incentives to get done earlier. So if you get done earlier, you get even more funds. And it's a pretty rigorous process where they have to submit a lot of material, and we do physical walk downs that get certified. So, and I think it's been pretty successful out at ETTP and at the other places we've had UCOR working. And we've kind of moved to that, in fact, at TWPC. It's fixed price, but they have very specific goals they have to achieve, and similar at Isotech with shipping goals. So,
very good. Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah. Or a lack thereof, right? So, I mean, time will tell, right? They've issued two out at the two RFPs went out in Hanford. And I think there is some desire at this point to instead of going out and changing the world out and sites, let's give it a little bit of runtime and see if there's some lessons learned that we can incorporate at other sites. I think there's some differences here, and we've had discussions about the fact that, where you're master of your domain, like at ETTP, it's an EM site. I can do what I want. I can move stuff around. I'm not quite that way when I'm sitting over at the central campus or at Y12, which has production missions, research missions at both those sites. So it's a little bit different being a renter, if you want to think of it that way, than owning. So.
And lessons learned from the as you mentioned before, that you had skipped a step in getting access to the site. So
yes. There you go. Right. It's just, it's all about the people, although we forgot about them. But right. I've had several of those in my career where oh, wow, after the fact, we should have forgot that. But anyway.
Fair enough. Okay. One other question was moving forward with the 10-year plan. Are we going to see a version of that?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
Last week at the field managers meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about that, as well as to what we're of course no longer calling it a 10-year plan. It's an alternatives analysis, and I don't know what's with Ann leaving. I don't know what the ultimate disposition of that will be. Okay. I can tell you that for ours, our accelerated plan doesn't look much different than the plan we're on right now. It's mostly funding driven, right? The blue sky plan is probably never going to happen because you have to make assumptions in regulatory space that I don't think you're ever going to get. Things like getting an exemption from RCRA, things like, Oak Ridge National Lab won't mind you closing tanks in place and leaving all these curies right downtown O&L. I just don't think you will get enough folks on board with some of that for the blue sky plan for Oak Ridge. And also, everybody assumed they get to ship all their stuff to WIP first, right? So, that's not going to happen, right? I mean, somebody will be first, but it's not going to be every site. And so I don't know how those will roll out. Some of the discussions, I'll just give you some of the inside baseball, some of the discussions have been, did we even want to do some of this? Because at best, nobody will be upset. At worst, regulators will look at it and say, what, are you crazy? Right? I mean, really, I'm going to get an exemption from RCRA. I don't think that's going to have a high likelihood when I can't even get GC to help me get rid of mercury, right? So, but our accelerated plan that we put in looks a lot like what we're working today, because it's about 640. I want to say the accelerated plan was 646, 650.
600 to 650.
So looks a lot like the funding we're getting today, and we're mostly funding limited, right, or driven, because very little of our cost is materials. We're not really building anything super whammadine, so 80 to 85% of our cost is labor. So.
Fair enough. Okay. Any other questions? Bill?
Yeah, I'm looking at these pictures here. You got at the lab in Y12, the color pictures. Looks like a pretty good majority of the buildings are coming down, or does that mean they're coming down? Or
well, what this means is at the time that we put this together, it's a snapshot in time, and this looks 10 years out. So it's the buildings that will be excess, either they're excess today or they will be. And so the majority of these should be, especially here, would be slated to come down. Here, some of these may actually end up being reused because missions are changing. So for instance, this facility right here, that I never can remember the number to, is it 3047 or 3042? So anyway, she's probably right, but it doesn't matter. But that's where they're doing that's where the lab currently is doing development and production of radioisotopes for Bayer Pharmaceutical. And so that has become, they've got a big production mission here. Now, right now, this is still being shown as being excess in the next 10 years, but if that continues, they will probably want to keep that facility. And in fact, 2026 over here, which when we're done with U-233, we were going to tear down, or that was the plan. In fact, they may want to take that facility over as well. At least that's the current thinking. So that it'll be a little fluid, but right now, these are all the old facilities that at least 2 years ago, if you'd had infinite funds, you would have torn them down.
So are they expecting to build others to
Yes.
replace those?
Yes. What the lab is really interested in, at least the last we talked, okay, so I want to be careful that I'm not right because they're in charge of their destiny, but our discussions with them so far say they would like to get rid of the majority of these old facilities in Isotope Row here. They call this now the spine of the lab, and they see that as you get your buildings out of the way, or these old buildings out of the way, and we're going to come back in behind and build. So that translational research facility that they're building that I talked about, that's actually right here. So that's the idea, is to tear down or get rid of the old buildings, and they can come in behind. Out here at Y12, you've got the biology complex, which is right here. And when that gets torn down, they will come in behind and build their new lithium processing facility. In fact, that's why you see me clean shaven today. I did a walk down that building this morning with Laura. There's a long story behind that, but my wife, when I came down to the kitchen this morning, turns around and she goes, "Oh my God." She says, "You just do this to irritate me." Now, years ago, I have very poor eyesight, and I thought about getting radiochromatography, which is the old from the early 90s. She says, "Well, if you do that, honey, I still want you to wear your glasses as an affectation," which struck me as kind of odd. And then she started on me about growing a beard, and it finally became clear that the less she saw my face, the better she liked it. So, yeah. So, go ahead, Dave. What question would you have?
I actually had the same response when I saw Jay this morning. That's not what I was going to comment on. Bill, one thing that can kind of throw you off with that Ornell slide is that, unlike the Y12 slide, which shows the entire facility,
yeah, that's
that Ornell slide only shows what we call the central campus area, which was the original area.
That's true.
So all the new buildings, world's fastest electron microscope and computer and all that
that's
this
like
way.
Sitting here.
Right, and then the life science stuff is on the other side. So those areas have really been built out with modern new facilities, and that's the real estate where they could continue to grow. So there's a high density of old buildings in the original footprint of the lab. But, yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? We have questions from the public. Please, microphone.
Hi, Jay. This is Amy Fitzgerald of the City of Oak Ridge. I think I see Councilwoman Smith over there. You touched in your presentation on 3 of the city's top priorities being, the continued reindustrialization of ETTP and the remote handled tree waste and moving that and the mercury out of the community. So had 2 quick questions. One may be more for Alan, but on the D&D fund, which we knew was going to wind down someday, the institutional controls and the monitoring you have to do at the old K-25 site, is that fund eligible for that, or will that be transitioned, that money, or to LM? is one question. The other question on the remote handled waste, it was our understanding when we got the recertification done that was required to make it eligible, again, to ship it out west. When you said we're either going to be first or last in line, what could we do, or what are those deciding criteria to keep us closer to the top of the queue?
So obviously that'll have to be coordinated with headquarters, and I'll answer that question before I go back to the funding question. But what we're competing with is in Idaho, for instance, they've got commissioner's orders and legal court cases and judges' directives to get rid of their true waste. So that's what we're struggling with right now is other states have been much more aggressive in some cases in how they're dealing with the transuranic waste. Now, what will help keep us first, I think, will be the use of the ROPS, the remote handled overpacks that we have. Because if they can use, right now, out at WIP, because of what happened with the ventilation, for them to be able to drill, to be able to do where they had always planned to put the remote handled waste, they would actually drill into the side panels and drop that down into basically big holes, as opposed to where you put contact handled now. It just looks like a great big gallery, and you can take it in with a forklift. If they can use the ROPS that we have, we can ship those out as uncontaminated. So we can ship those on normal conveyance out there to them, and they can then in their facility put it back in and take the ROP down in the underground, and you can stick it in the panels with the CH as well. But that takes a permit change the state of New Mexico has to make, and it takes a safety basis change that DOE can do. And that was originally not seen as something they wanted to pursue, but I think that has changed as they have delayed being able to get ventilation in so that they can get the equipment in to drill. One of the problems they have is they are staying on filtered ventilation, which is not very many CFM, and you cannot run diesel and things like that and have many people in the underground, so you have to really limit your activities. They're bringing in more battery-operated equipment, but those big drillers and things like that would still either be diesel or propane-powered, and so until they can, and it's a pretty major project to get a huge ventilation system set up. They're doing that. They've got a project to do that, but it means drilling a new shaft. So it's years away if that's what we wait on. So I think that's our key to staying first, right? So those were the two proposals I saw that caused everybody to get all excited because if we're first, somebody else is last, and they're not happy about that. So on your other question, we had actually, back before LM came around and we started having discussions with them about what they were willing to do, we were actually looking at funding our long-term stewardship, not out of UED&D funds, but what 41, 42 defense. But now LM will take it, and so we're starting to talk to them about what kind of budget they need. They actually do a 75-year budget, and so we're talking to them now about when they take those types of institutional controls. And for instance, if we have to install a pump and treat or some type of system like that, they would actually, if we run it.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.